So the Lusitania is set to set sail on May 1st, God, let me just start over.
Also, just a big win. Big win that we're saying Lusitania.
I have practiced saying Lusitania for the past hour, and I have it as a tab with both the phonetic spelling and how to click the button to hear it again after just listening to the book for 9 hours.
It's like not that hard. It's exactly how it's spelled.
No, exactly how it's spelled would be Lousuhtayneeuh, which
That's
is the
phonetic
spelling.
Oh my god.
Let's go beyond the first page. Let's go beyond the first page.
Hello, second pagers, and welcome back to Beyond the First Page podcast with siblings Phoebe, Phil, and Isaac. I'm Phoebe.
I'm Phil.
I'm Isaac.
And this is Club Meeting 25, Dead Wake by Erik Larson. I just want to start off by reminding everybody that if you like this podcast, please follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok to see more book recommendations and also get some snippets of the episode. So please check us out on both of those places as well. And if you like this podcast, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. And because of the nature of this podcast, it is a book club style podcast. And so we will be talking about major plot points and spoilers from throughout the book. So if you don't want Dead Wake by Erik Larson, which is based on a real event that happened, ruined for you, recommend that you read the book and or Google the sinking of the Lusitania.
Right. Don't interact with World War I at all if you don't want any spoiler alerts.
Yeah, just don't Google World War I, which actually, like, just going off the cuff here, did not know about the Lusitania sinking.
Me neither. I did know about the submarines. Phoebe has a note. Didn't know the Germans were using submarines.
Was.
No, that was not my note. My note was, and maybe I didn't put this clearly. My note was, I thought it was very interesting how they were tracking the Brits were tracking very specific submarine captains in that room 40, which was their intel room.
Yeah. Okay.
So I thought that was interesting that they knew the nicknames of the captains. They knew kind of their MOs. So they knew that boat 20 was a killer. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I did know that they were using submarines. I did think it was wild that they were just going around with sonar, or
that was wild.
Satellite.
That's one of my questions, actually, but we'll get into it.
Okay, yeah. So we're like putting everything out up front, even before we've broken the ice. Let's freaking go. No, but back to my point. If you don't want Dead Wake,
Titanic pun.
I thought it was too.
Absolutely terrible, and no. But yeah, if you don't want Dead Wake ruined for you, really recommend that you read it and then come on and listen to the podcast. And even though, as we've already mentioned, all puns aside, that we've already broken the ice, we will just say our icebreaker for today is, would you have gotten on the Lusitania? There was for our listeners who maybe haven't read it or read it a while ago, there was a warning issued by the German government saying that they were going to start sinking any passenger vessels that came in range of any of their submarines, essentially, is what the message was saying. And so these civilians either may or may not have seen that before they boarded this ship, but would you have gotten on a ship maybe knowing or not knowing that information? I think that's the question. And I would say in 30 seconds as an answer, yes, I would have gotten on. I don't think I would have believed the government. And I also think that it does seem, based on like all the research that Erik Larson presented, that there was talk of British destroyer escorts to the Lusitania. And so I think that I would have gotten on because of all of that information. Phil, would you have gotten on?
Yeah, I think...
Actually, this is also post-Titanic for our listeners as well.
Yeah, I guess Probably I would have, because like it was so talked down about like the Germans in World War One at all in the United States. I don't. If I was British, I definitely would not have gotten on. But if I was American, yes. But the Brits had been at war with Germany for a while now, and I don't think I would have gotten on if like, for example, like Iraq in 2003 would have said, yeah, we're going to shoot over any passenger planes that fly over Iraq. I don't think I would have gone on a passenger
Yeah.
plane that would have flown
With
over
in the
Iraq.
age of information. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isaac, what about you?
Yeah, I think I unfortunately would have gotten on as well. More so because
So
I'm the same
bumble
person
of
that
idiots.
drove to Buffalo in the
Yeah.
winter storm when people were saying like the city's closed, and I was like, well, not to me.
Germany's not going to sink this ship.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I think I would have also gone on just out of like ignorant hubris that like those things don't happen to me.
Right.
So
we'd all three be dead, basically, is the bottom line. Pre-World War I. And I think we've already gotten in a pretty good synopsis. Also, maybe a lot of listeners know about the Lusitania, but Isaac, would you just give us Dead Wake in 60 seconds?
Yes. The Lusitania set sail on May 1st, 1915, from New York City, New York, bound for Liverpool, England. It departed during a time of the world in turmoil. Britain was at war with Germany and Europe, and World War I was underway for most of the world, but the United States was still neutral. This was problematic, however, because Germany was using U-boats, their submarines, to attack any ship in the Atlantic, including neutral merchant and passenger vessels. The Lusitania was a huge passenger ship for the British steamship company Cunard and was one of the largest and fastest ships of its day. Despite its accolades, there was a threat to the Lusitania actually published in American newspapers before it set sail by the Germans and their U-boats. This book walks the reader through the time right before the Lithuania.
Lusitania. It's an S. It's like it literally
It's like
could
the
not
This
be.
I got it. This
Just
book
say
walks the
Lucy.
reader through the aftermath of its horrible torpedoing by a German U-boat.
Okay, and we got through it. Woohoo. The Lusitania. No, that's great. Thank you, Isaac, for that summary for all of us and the listeners. And I'm excited because I will say, as our listeners probably have picked up on by now, we try to have some semblance of a planning session before we talk actually on the podcast. So we have kind of a direction for the conversation because we don't just want people hearing our opinions spewed out onto the internet. However, I was very happy that my topics were selected this week. As you can probably imagine, they are not often selected. Phil usually, or even Isaac, has some good input. And so, but they're also very
Even
basic.
Isaac.
Even Isaac sometimes.
Yeah.
Never
Thanks
me.
for that phone.
And mine are very simplistic, but I just think, as a book club does, what did we learn from this book? I think that's a great thing that I want to talk about because I did learn things, aka that the Lusitania was a passenger vessel that was sunk by a German U-boat, which was one of the catalysts for America entering World War I. I found that to be interesting in itself, but as I mentioned earlier, I kind of gave away all the things I've already learned, but I really liked that they talked about Room 40 and the espionage going on, and that's kind of like an imitation game idea if people have seen that movie. A very top secret group of people in the British government who were intercepting messages from the U-boats. And so I liked that that they really had the pulse on what was going on. And that was like a bit confusing also then because the Lusitania, you would think at that point, if they had the pulse of what was going on, it wouldn't have sank. And we can talk more about that. But I think another thing that I was interested in was the Well, I didn't know that Germans were shooting down civilian boats. Is that what you guys were saying, that you were surprised that I didn't know that?
I was just like making a joke that you didn't
Oh.
know they had like submarines, but I did know that. I didn't know the Lusitania specifically, but I did know that the Germans were just like blowing things out of the water left
Yeah.
and right, regardless of its affiliation.
Yeah. So I guess my bottom line is I did learn stuff. I like the anecdotal things about women's mental health at that time period, and how basically they were saying, like, in order to cure what it's like nervous syndrome or over nervous syndrome, that you just lay down and don't do anything, like don't even rotate yourself in the bed. I found that portion to be very interesting. I made a note of the yellow wallpaper. I want to read that short story that was written by the woman.
We read it in junior year. You probably have read it.
I actually
because
think
we all
I
went through the same
did.
curriculum
Yeah.
in Miss Crossland's class. Yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna
about
reread it.
postpartum Depression.
Yeah. So I made a note of that. Yeah, I think a book like this, like you're just looking for a few little nuggets like that. And for me, it was an easy read, and I did get a few nuggets. And I know, I think Isaac, maybe you felt a little bit like you also maybe took some stuff away.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was some good learning. At least for Phoebe and I, it's kind of obvious we did.
Our ignorance.
Did you do junior RTC, Phil,
Yeah.
in high school? So
Yeah.
that was supposed to be our history classes, and obviously we weren't learning anything. So like a lot of this stuff is just either from your own research or reading other books or whatever. But somewhat limited in our world history, I would say.
Yeah, as it turns out.
Yeah. But so I thought it kind of starting to be the catalyst was cool. I do think that though, like as the book talks about, it's 2 years after the torpedoing of the Lusitania that we actually enter World War One.
Right.
And obviously this book was about this event, so like it is written to kind of steer you to believe, like, you know, this was the true catalyst.
Right.
And I guess maybe catalyst is the right word, but I would say this was just like the
This wasn't even
largest domino that fell
it's-
to start
Yeah.
it.
Well,
But I
Right.
thought it was
What's
cool that the
usually-
Mexican thing,
Oh, that like secret Mexican
that they
thing.
go into the Germans like reached out to the Mexican ambassador, and either it got intercepted or something.
The
or
Brits
that-
intercepted it. Mhm.
Yeah, and was essentially the Germans were like, hey, Mexico, team up with us, attack the United States, and then you can have like California back or something. And then that was when Woodrow Wilson finally, after, 3 or 4 years of, oh, what should we do? Was like, okay, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was like the turning time. Like before this, everyone in the U.S. was like, no,
Isolationist.
do not get involved.
Gotcha.
And this was like, okay, like let's actually start thinking about this and like actually consider this. Because it was really the first time that it affected Americans
Yeah.
at all, really. Because actually it was really helpful for us. World War One economically was fantastic for the United States.
Because
so
people
was
were
World War
buying
II, actually.
munitions and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Um,
thought there were Americans dying on those merchant ships being shot, just not in the numbers that died in this Lusitania.
I think there was proven one other. Remember that guy who ended up
that
showing
washed
up?
ashore. Yeah.
Yeah, like they couldn't prove he was on it, and then years later they did. So there was
okay.
actually, but
So
that
it
was a
wasn't
single American
large
life.
scale. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I don't know if there was any others. Yeah.
No, I mean, I learned a lot too, actually. I didn't know Woodrow Wilson was just courting a woman while he was president.
That was
No.
misleading, don't you think? Like, since you brought that up, and this is kind of a freestyle book club, that was misleading, don't you think? He wasn't just, it felt like he was just dating
Yeah.
this woman.
No, I mean, that's one of my biggest complaints. But I didn't even know he was dating during I like
His
didn't know that
presidency.
he was single, and yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
And then I didn't know about the whole conspiracy of Britain just like letting everything go. I think
I
that
wanted to
was the
bring that
most
up,
interesting
too.
part of the book. In the book
So
should have been more
explain
about
that,
and
Phil.
the first half of the book sucked.
Yeah.
That was my opinion of the book. So basically, Britain knew that the Lusitania was gonna sink, and they just let it happen because they knew that that would bring America into the war. And then they proceeded to sort of let stuff like that happen throughout the next couple years until America did join the war. And that's why they sort of flagged certain things like the Mexico transmission and released that compared to other things that they didn't.
Yeah, it feels very on brand for
Winston Churchill.
yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it definitely it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wasn't like a dig at Winston Churchill necessarily. I think he's like such an interesting character of the whole
He's a
what is it,
mastermind.
of the 20th century. And actually, my book recommendation is a book about him as well. But yeah, total mastermind. And didn't know anything about the code breakers, like you were saying. Phil, I 100% agree with you. That whole idea that they knew this code and were holding on to it for strategic stuff, and then the conspiracy that they were just letting this happen to get the US involved is like not surprising at all, but also just like wild that is how
How it
we
happened.
could have possibly entered. But you're like reading this, and within like the second chapter or third chapter, the room 40 is introduced, and you're like, of course Winston Churchill is involved in this somehow.
Yeah,
Like
for
the
sure.
man is everywhere.
Yeah. It says like he never slept. He just
Yeah.
did this running of the government the whole time. And it was funny, like he even admitted he put his number 2, I think, in charge because he was like, I could easily manipulate him. Or it was
Yeah.
somebody that he had to work closely with that
He was
able
like
to
some really
appoint.
old guy who was like senile.
Wait, Phil, Phil's about to have a hot take.
No, it's not a hot take. It's just like I mean, the book was written that way. This was not Winston Churchill either. I'm sorry. Like, he was involved, but he was extremely unpopular, did not have much power at all.
I don't agree with you. I don't think that he didn't have power. I think he was unpopular. But I do think
in the parliamentary system, you cannot this book made it. I'm just saying the parliamentary system, like you have to have a majority to have power. Like that's how it works. But
he was in charge of the admiralty.
Unpopular.
He was in charge of the admiralty, or how do you say that?
Yeah.
Admiralty.
Okay.
I thought he was like the head of the Department of the Navy. Yeah, I'm just saying I don't know enough about it. I was just like, well, of course Winston Churchill is involved.
I think that's true. I just am pretty skeptical about sort of how this was written because of the Woodrow Wilson thing. I mean, that was really just misleading.
So he was just getting clicks by mentioning Winston Churchill.
I mean, no, it's not. It's a more nuanced story that, like, it did really seem like Winston Churchill was this mastermind behind Room 40. I don't think that was true.
I don't think that my impression was that
I don't know if you would have gotten on that boat, Phil.
I just I don't know.
You were not a fan.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I definitely was a little perturbed by the telling
of Woodrow Wilson's presidency.
Yeah, I mean, I know it seems like I'm getting stuck up on that point, but that is the main point of the book. Like, us joining World War I is sort of the main point of the book.
So
and I think
is it, or is it just the telling of this crash? Because this is one of those books that, and I wish I had some like other examples, these nonfiction books that are centered around this kind of not insignificant event, but just event that you're like, oh, I didn't know that much about it. And then really you're like, that's not really what this book is about.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily get the sense that that's what there was a lot of time spent on, which I think I have a problem with as well. Like, I think it should have been more about
completely
War I and War,
yeah.
But this book was about the
sinking of Lusitania.
The sinking and like all the people on it. Like, there was all that stuff in there that I was like, this doesn't need to be in here at all.
Yeah.
So this could still be called the exact same thing.
And not include
focus
that.
More on this other stuff.
Like, open it with a very detailed account of the sinking, and then leave the latter half of the book to really engage in that very
or you
intricate
could base it around the
issue.
whole thing, but go like we don't need to hear about the fortune teller and
Yeah. I just don't think there was enough there to make a whole book otherwise. Like the
So,
Lusitania
okay,
got
But there
that's
fun.
the
is.
thing.
There's the whole
There's-
beginning of World War One.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
mean,
what I'm saying. Like, just go on to how we got into the war, you know?
But here's the thing. I
Oh,
think we've
yeah.
all read a story about like so mine that I'm thinking is going to be my recommendation is going to be The Wager. But that was a pretty insignificant event. Yeah, it was about a shipwreck and them living on an island. And the whole book was about that. But I was like the backstories of these characters that didn't matter, I was very interested. And then, like, he made it necessary.
Yeah.
I don't care that Theodosia whatever
She was
like
the
she
worst.
was completely irrelevant, but also just like she was completely irrelevant from start to finish. She did not matter at all.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember if she survived. I don't
Yeah, I can't
care.
either.
Like I have
She
She
did.
must have if we know
She
so
did.
much about her.
Yeah, she did.
Did she?
I
Well,
think
she
it's
was
like
brought up like I mean, she was maybe an eighth of this book, and I every time she came up, I was like, I don't care about this woman.
Or the
Like,
guy with all the sellings of the Charles Dickens stuff.
Oh yeah,
I
Yeah,
can't remember if
that
he
was
died
stupid.
or not either.
Even
Yeah.
See,
the only
Theodora
person
was
that was
important to me because I liked the women's health, the women's mental health aspect. Like that, at least there was.
she
some...
wasn't even the one about the women's mental health.
Well, they did talk a lot about how she was prone to melancholy and all this other stuff.
That was a different woman.
No, that was her too. There was everyone,
Okay,
every
there was-
woman at that time.
Yeah,
was
every
kinda
woman.
depressed.
Okay, then there was
It's
Arthur
pre-suffrage.
Vanderbilt.
Pretty tough to be a
Yeah,
to be a woman.
high-class white woman
yeah.
in America.
But then there was the Arthur Vanderbilt who, again, did not
Don't
matter.
care.
Like, it would have been nice if they told the story of someone who actually did something on the Lusitania.
the ship
Like,
captain.
focus more on the captain. He was
Yeah.
the only one that was interesting.
Yeah.
And they didn't really give him any credence.
No.
They
Dude, the
also,
man was a cat, 9 lives.
Yeah, he really
Yeah.
was. After his boats kept sinking.
So that's what I loved. The only part that I loved about the passengers was all the guy that missed the Titanic, got on the Lusitania, went straight to the Hindenburg. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, there were like 4 of those. Like, there were
Yeah.
a lot of those, and that I thought was interesting. But like,
Yeah.
that was the only part, and that guy wasn't touched on again. I thought that the fact that the captain went to the trial of the Titanic right before the Lusitania
Yeah, the
sank
day
was
of
super
the launch.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Or the day
but,
before,
like,
maybe.
that was like the interesting parts, and he just didn't spend the right amount of time there. He gave these backstories that he never tied into any type of plot.
Well, Phil, I want to focus on the thing that you had said earlier about Woodrow Wilson, because I do agree with you about that. I didn't mind the backstories. I agree with you; they're kind of irrelevant, but I felt like it was filler for the story. Like it was kind of
It was
a
filler.
reprieve. It was a reprieve for me from the U-boats, and so you're getting this like tension built because you obviously know that they're tracking the Lusitania, and then there's this like reprieve. So it's kind of a stark contrast, which I didn't mind. But I do agree with you that there is a shadow of doubt cast from the listener or reader's perspective about the legitimacy of all of the research done for this book with the way that Woodrow Wilson's particular part was told. And I definitely agree with you about that. And I think that that's a point worth just like summarizing for the readers. If you both agree, or it sounded like that's what you were trying to say, Phil, is like,
Yes.
there was a gaping hole in this book where Woodrow Wilson's story was supposed to be. And I don't know if Erik Larson, if it was a political issue or if he just didn't have enough information, which seems very unlikely, or he was trying to add a thread of romance throughout the book for the listener to get engaged with. But I definitely agree with you that makes you question other things about the book then as well, because it just was not told in its entirety.
And I think that do we want to sort of summarize that a little bit for the readers that basically it portrayed Woodrow Wilson, who his wife had just died. He met this woman, Ethel, or Edith. And he was basically courting her, but she was like denying his courtship. And all of this was sort of being told intermittently throughout. It was like on board the Lusitania, on board the German U-boat, and then Edith and Woodrow going for a ride. And it was just like, okay. And also just the only part that I thought was interesting was just Edith was not interested actually in the president.
Yeah, in the
free world.
president.
Yeah, so
Oh, he
anyway.
wasn't that yet. We're isolationists back then. So
Yeah,
Okay,
not
true.
technically.
Okay,
yeah.
the president of my country then. Yeah, and then the one the one agreed upon horrible thing about Woodrow Wilson is also that he was extremely racist. And the only time the book mentioned that was when he showed Birth of a Nation, and it portrayed it like
It was an
he
accident.
was surprised that it was a KKK film,
Yeah.
which is
Could not be further from the truth.
extremely whitewashing. Like, could not. It's actually just factually wrong.
Yeah.
So, and the reason I do know a lot about Woodrow Wilson is because he was a Princeton alum, and he like named the whole school and was president of Princeton. And then everything in the past 10 years has been stripped, and it was a huge debate about his legacy. Like, he was good with the League of Nations, but extremely racist. So I do know quite a bit about Woodrow Wilson. But obviously he was extremely instrumental in joining World War I, and that was just not portrayed at all. It was not like, oh, I'm thinking about World War I at all. It was sort of like Lusitania, U-boat, then Edith.
And it wasn't even like she was providing stuff like, hey, the Germans are really killing us out there. Like, it was like
she was also not like feeding any of
nothing.
that.
There was
She
a
was irrelevant to the
complete break.
story.
Yeah, there was like a complete break in the thing. So
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I agree with all the fluff of all the backstories of the irrelevant characters and the Wilson thing. I think that there could have been a focus on Wilson had he focused on things that mattered to the book, i.e.,
The Nation.
the news about the
Lusitania.
Lusitania.
He's just trying to. I like this is the second time now that Isaac's waited till someone says it for him so he can repeat it.
Lusitania. Stuff about the Lusitania, or just like the build up to World War I in general. I sort of thought that this book could still have been centered around this torpedoing of the Lusitania, with the larger story bouncing from Wilson going through that and the political strife. Or I don't know. Is there political strife or not? I have no idea because we didn't learn anything of the build up to the U.S. entering World War I. A much deeper dive into the Room 40, much deeper dive into the U-boat captains. Like, what the like?
That was wild.
You could have written a nonfiction book of hunting Red October, and then the ship captain. They couldn't get rid of him. He got shot down like so many times. His boats were sinking left and right. And he was forced to retire at like 80 or I don't know what it was, like 65. Like, he lived forever.
Yeah. Wait, didn't he die on a boat or no? Am I making that up?
No, I think he was forced to retire.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh no, his son died. His youngest son died.
Oh, right.
That was bad.
Yeah, that was
in World War II, I think, though.
World War II. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
Wait, so Isaac, what did you like about the book?
I liked the Codebreaker stuff, or the Room 40 stuff. The only anecdotes that I liked, and I wrote down 3. The first one was that how there was like a acknowledgement that the lesson learned from the Titanic were just not there.
Right.
They were just this still assumption of like, oh, this is a big fast ship, nothing can happen to it.
Right.
By both the company and passengers. Some passengers didn't get on, but I mean, still over 2,000 people got on the boat. So, and then the other one was when it was sinking, the people getting sucked into the
wake
tunnels and then being shot back out and still alive, just like covered in soot and then like seemingly fine. That is like terrifying.
Wait, can you explain that? Because I didn't really actually understand what they were talking about. I thought you were talking about like getting sucked under the boat, people jumping out and getting sucked under. But I remember the one woman
was happening too. Yeah, but I think
came
there
out
was
covered
like
in soot.
So I understood it as they got like, yeah, the boat was sinking and they got pulled into the tunnel, but then like the pressure, like some pressure differential or something, like shot them back out, and they were like covered in soot but
Alive.
still alive. So that's just like, we're laughing but horrifying.
Yeah, true.
But hopefully they lived. That is crazy. So that was that was good hands-on, and that could have been included in my version of the book. And then the woman who had a little bit of a backstory. She was the mom of the kid who had measles, and he either fell off the lifeboat or fell off the side of the boat, but he's struggling in the water and he sees a woman giving birth, which you assume is his mom in the rowboat.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy too.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So those were, if we wanted to go down this road of these kind of stories that I guess are interesting, but in my version, if I was writing this book, I would have not really gone down that road, and like I said, would have included, way more about the U-boat captains and just U-boat culture, U-boat anything. The President Wilson, doing actual presidential stuff,
right?
And then more into the code. The British code.
Yeah.
And the captain. The captain of the Lusitania.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I would echo both of your thoughts. Legitimize the Woodrow Wilson portion, go more into how we entered World War I, and give a detailed account of the Lusitania. But
And here's the thing, I think this whole conversation is like testament to the fact that this was not done well.
Okay, I will say
we're
I changed my
talking-
rating as we were talking.
Okay, yeah, that's a classic Phoebe move. No, like I think the character of this conversation is testament to the fact that this book was not done well, because we're all talking about this like an event, how it led to World War I. I mean, this was a tragedy. None of us are like, holy crap, this was so sad. Like, this is
true.
actually so tragic. And it was. I mean, so
point.
many people died. And Isaac is like, whoa, dude, he saw his mother giving birth. And it was written sort of just like, oh, and then
Blasé.
yeah, like sort of
Yeah.
never found that Vanderbilt guy, but he paid $22,000 in cash for his ticket, so that's pretty cool. Like,
That's actually a really good point, Phil. Like, up until you just said that, I really was not feeling bad for these people at all. And like, that's horrible.
Which is right. And this was like a tragedy. This was
it
like
does
a
beg the
9/11
question, like,
scale
why did
tragedy.
they get? But it does beg the question, why did they get on that boat? Which I think why it was a good icebreaker. But then again, we proved the point because we all three said we would get on.
Yeah, and I think like you would have had to be reading the news. You would have had to, or you're just like, I have to get home. Like, what else am I gonna do?
Right, for sure.
But also, hindsight's 2020. Like, this is how many times have you been on an aircraft that has taxied down the runway and then been like, actually,
Something's
the
wrong.
wheels broke, and you're just like, are you kidding me? This aircraft's fine.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like that summarized it very well. Unless you guys had anything else you wanted to talk about, I would say we could rate it. And as I mentioned, I've changed from a 2 to a 1. I will not be recommending this book to anybody.
I think one of the cooler parts of this book was the title. I mean, Dead Wake. Was cool.
Yeah. And the German
I
U-boats.
didn't know what a dead wake was.
I didn't either. And the other thing I wanted to say, actually, I forgot about this. I wanted to say you mentioned, Isaac, about talking about the Germans, because there was a point where I was actually like kind of sympathizing with this German captain. They were like, he was a jovial man who was very kind. And then he was like, I will destroy, I'm going on. It was a game. Like, it was literally a game. They were going after sinks per ton. And that was absolutely wild. And I immediately lost sympathy, I will say, for any of those German, like they were leaving. They basically said the German government put it in the hands of these captains to make that decision. And they were deciding to sink these boats. And so, yeah, that was just, to me, no sympathy for the German captain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reward system was there based on tonnage. So
right. Yeah. So
I
they
think
were
It was
saying,
still the human decision, but like
yeah,
the system was set up for them. And I mean, I'm not sympathizing with them. Obviously, it's
no,
horrible, but
no,
war is horrible. So
yeah,
that's a whole another conversation, I think.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that like that is a whole nother conversation, but I think that's an important conversation that could have been had in this book. I think that
Yeah.
that's true with anything. I mean, everyone has to live with themselves, right? Like everyone goes home to their kids, and that is sort of the point that I think is made with this German captain. He's killing all these people, like super nice guy to all his crewmates, like very popular.
yeah.
And I think that that dichotomy could have been sort of teased out a little
Explored.
bit more, and it just wasn't at all.
So are you even a 1, Phil?
I'm a 1. I think it's a interesting enough book. I mean, I finished it in a couple days, so I think the latter half of the book probably redeemed it for me. If it would have continued like the former, it would have been pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I gave it a 1 as well. Just to give it a little credit though, like if you are, someone who's I'm kind of into reading, but nonfiction's not my bag, but I'd like to read more of it.
Mhm.
So as far as nonfiction goes, a pretty easy nonfiction
Yeah.
read. We all were a little annoyed by it, but I think we all read a decent amount of nonfiction. So we open it up, we're like, let's get to let's learn about this thing.
Right.
Whereas this, there was a beachy read fluff to it, a coziness, if you will, to this nonfiction book, which
It's a great.
what you are trying to do is that, like, you nailed it.
Yeah. But kind of bad when it's a little like Phil mentioned, maybe there should have been
such
more
a like
dark topic.
horrific topic.
Yeah.
It could have. It's a good one if you want to learn something, but also you don't have your hands free. So like if you zone back out, if you zone out and zone back in, you didn't really miss much.
Right.
Whereas like other nonfictions, you might actually miss an important thing. This one
Yeah.
you would just miss Thea, whatever her name was.
Yeah. Something I wanted to say, just the driving around of the submarines with no radar. They were just like,
Crazy.
do you sail a submarine? I'm not sure. Drive a submarine,
I
but
think you captain it. I don't know.
so, but my question is, they're only using charts. If they don't have any radar, what are they charting the sea with? So, listeners out there, if you have
if you
answer
know
that question, post a comment
I'll send
to us.
this one over to Hayden.
Yeah. So I found that interesting, but it is kind of crazy just driving in the sea blind.
and then popping up, seeing, and then
you were
popping
like,
back down.
no boats.
Yeah. And the life aboard, that could have been explored a lot more. Like that sounded okay. Subs today sound bad. That sounded freaking terrible. There is no way to shower. It's like 50 men or whatever. Yeah, like it sounded just absolutely
But let's bring a
awful.
couple dogs on board. Just,
just to throw it in the mix. Oh my gosh. Well, I would say I took a different approach to the recommendation portion. And so I think if you liked Dead Wake, or if you want to explore more topics that were talked about in it, I picked Night Watch by Jane Ann Phillips. It actually won the Pulitzer Prize last year, I believe. And it is about it's a fictional story about a woman and her daughter and being institutionalized. It's during the Civil War time period, actually. So earlier than this book was. But yeah, that's what I got the most maybe out of this book, or it just made me think more about that. And so I would recommend Night Watch. Honestly, if you liked or didn't like this book, it's a great book. Phil, what about you?
Yeah, so mine was The Wager by David Gran, which was a story of a shipwreck in, I believe, 18th century England. And it was basically these guys that were trying to just hightail it around the Cape of Good Hope. But there's a shipwreck, and it's just like super enlightening of the entire sort of time period. how they were just shoving people onto boats. It was wild. Like, they raided the veterans hospital and one guy couldn't even make it on the boat and they carried him on a stretcher onto the boat just for bodies. But much more engrossing than this. But if you're looking for a nonfiction about boats, and then there's a shipwreck and then there's them living on the island. So super cool. Yeah, would read. It's by the same guy that wrote Killers of the Flower Moon, which was just the Leonardo DiCaprio film.
Nice. Good recommendation. Isaac, what about you?
So mine is Hero of the Empire by Candace Millard. It's about Winston Churchill as like a young, I think he's like 24, 25 before he has entered
The government.
Yeah, as a politician. But it's just crazy because we talked about him in this podcast as being a mastermind. He really was. This is his experience in the Boer War in Sudan. And he went there with a goal to make himself famous and
And he did
put
it.
himself in a situation to do that. Yeah. With knowing then at 24, 25 that he was going to be the prime minister of England.
Dang.
So it was just a very interesting read, probably a story definitely our history, world history teachers didn't teach
Didn't
us
tell.
about, but maybe a lot of people don't know. So it was cool.
Interesting. Wow, good recommendations, gents. Phil, were you going to say something snarky about Winston Churchill?
I was not.
Okay. Thank you very much. And before we go, we just wanted to talk briefly about what we're going to be reading next time on the podcast, and that is Impossible Creatures. It is by Catherine Rendell, and it is a children's book, or it's not a children's book, but it's a young adult book,
I
and
think
it's a
a
quick read.
children's book.
Oh,
It seems like it's like pre-teen, maybe.
yeah. Like I was going to
It's
recommend
not
it to our
YA.
cousin who is like in 7th grade.
Yeah.
Are we
Okay.
mad about
Okay.
that?
I don't. No, it's good. I'm not mad. Goodness. I'm just saying.
No.
I don't think. Yeah, you're fine.
It's younger than young adult.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm reading it currently. I would classify it as young adult.
Okay.
Yeah,
I believe you.
but we'll see at the
Yeah.
end.
I haven't
what we
read it
think.
yet. I was just researching it to try to get what we're reading next.
Yeah, so it's a younger adult book, we'll say. And Isaac, would you just be able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Impossible Creatures by Catherine Rundle follows a young girl and boy through a mythical land called the Archipelago, where many magical creatures live. Mal, who is from the archipelago, and Christopher, who is from our world, team up in an attempt to save the land from a source of darkness.
Okay, great. It's a quick read. I hope our readers and listeners enjoy it. And this is a bi-weekly reminder to call someone that you love, tell them about the First Page podcast. If you like this podcast, again, a reminder to follow us and give us a 5-star rating. And as you're calling this person and telling them that you love them, tell them about a good book that you read. Maybe will be Dead Wake, maybe won't be. And until we meet again, stay classy, second pagers. We'll see you later.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Let's go beyond.